I wanted you to know this.
Is this a sign-in
Yes, sir.
meeting or no?
It says 5 o'clock, so I wasn't sure.
All right, it is.
Call the Broken Arrow Special City Council meeting to order. Roll call.
Pickle,
Here.
Green,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Parks. Here. Wimpy.
Here. Item 3, preview ordinances. 3A, consideration, discussion, and possible preview of ordinance number 3905, amending Chapter 7, Article 17, definitions, operating standards, platform duties, owner cap, enforcement, and appendix checklist. Trevor, maybe?
Yes, I am prepared and ready to go. Thank you.
Just one point is that a lot of work went into this with Trevor and Chief Arnold. And I wanted Trevor to lead this conversation since it's ord amendments, but the chief's going to be moving in and out to answer questions and to discuss what's being proposed.
And to begin, I thought we had a PowerPoint presentation. There it is. Ask and you shall receive. Excellent. So I think these are some items that we can move through basically at your leisure. At any time, if you have any questions or comments or directions, that's really what this is a work session to get your input. So that we know exactly what you want to do to regulate this area. We have some suggestions from our last preview ordinance, and kind of to bring you up to speed, what's happened since then is Chief Arnold has met with several short-term rental owners, and so we've gotten input from the business community to see how these regulations would impact their day-to-day operations. They also had some recommendations on what they thought would make some better revisions or changes. And we were in agreement with several of those, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about what those are as we go forward with it. Originally, one of the thoughts I had was to just go line by line on all the different changes, but I decided a more efficient approach would be let's highlight at a 30,000 foot level, and then we can kind of drill down on what the recommended changes would be. And then if you wanted to get into details on any of the others, we'll certainly have an opportunity to do that. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin. So we really wanted to talk a little bit about the current state of the short-term rentals. Like I said, we're going to talk about what some of the changes are with the owners. Specifically, we're going to talk about the recommended insurance requirement. Like I said, we're not going to go the ordinance line by line, but we are going to talk about next steps. Let's do the next slide. So let's talk about the current state of affairs. So the first thing we need to do is get our bearings in terms of the definitions. So we have 3 types of short-term rentals in our city. The first type are called STR1s, and those are where the owner resides on the premises, and there's a single-family dwelling where there's no more than 2 guest bedrooms or sleeping rooms are rented. So those are the less intense uses. And so as we go through there, we'll see that depending on the use of the residence, that might dictate how intensive the regulations would be. So you'll see some of the regulations that we'll be recommending for a short-term rental 1 might be less than what we would say for a short-term rental 2 or 3. We currently have 10 short-term rental 1s in the city. The second type we have is a type 2. We have 61 of those in the city right now, and there's no owner occupancies required, but on type 2s, there's no more than 4 guest bedrooms that are allowed. And then once you get to type 3, you get the more intensive use. They're more like a Airbnb, like a bed and breakfast or an inn, more like that, because those are no more than 8 units. So you're getting into more of a boarding house type unit at that point. But what we have found through our investigation is that we've identified 65 short-term rentals operating without a license. Because we don't have information from them, we don't know how to categorize them. We don't know exactly the number of rooms or if they're owner occupied. So there's yes ma'am.
Question on that. So but you know that there are 65 out there, but we don't have a way of contacting them, or?
Well, I would have to defer to Rocky if he had some more information on how we identified the 65 that are operating without a license.
So yeah, we've identified them through the VRBO or the other short-term rental platforms, and we do send them letters, but currently we have no enforcement mechanism to have them come into compliance. So this
So
week
if we
we're
have no
sending out.
mechanism to have them come into compliance, why would anyone else comply?
and that's why
That's
we're
part
here.
of what we're talking about
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah, and towards the end, that's one of the points that we have to talk about, is like, what can we do to increase penalties, to put some teeth into our ordinance so that we can get compliance? And we can talk about some of the challenges that we've been having on that area. We've identified approximately 2 to 3 short-term rentals coming online every week. And like we mentioned, one of the difficulties that we're having is that a lot of these unlicensed sites are owned by out-of-state owners. And I've talked to our prosecutor about it, and what ends up happening is we do the best we can to get good service on the citations, oftentimes by leaving them on at the residence. But if they're foreign domiciled people, sometimes they're not even getting these, especially if we don't have their local agent, on file, which is one of the changes that we've had requested, is that you have to have a local known agent that can be responsive in a short amount of time. And so that's one of the challenges that we'd had. And then the other thing that we have is some of the citations will be left at the address, and we need to be more efficient on the prosecution side and getting and requesting our judge to follow through with warrants. But again, the difficulty is, or in failure to appear, but the difficulty is we're not a court of record. If the person who owns it is out of state, it's very difficult to get them to comply to come to a non-court of record for a code violation. And so that's just one of the limits of our powers when we have folks that own these that are out of state. So those are some of the challenges that we've been facing. Unfortunately, I don't have any like bulletproof, silver bullet, solutions that we can, haul them in front of our judge, or have fines for them. It's just difficult because we're trying to exercise power over somebody who's not physically here. So those are some of the challenges that we're facing. The next area that you asked us to look at was the hotel motel tax on the short-term rentals. And any hotel motel tax has to be passed by a vote of the people. Any tax has to be voted on by a vote of the people. And that happened, I want to say it was back in 2008. And so we have that codified for the hotel tax in section 22-111 for our hotel and motel. But the key portion of this tax is, how do we define a hotel under our current ordinance? Because that's the only entity that we can collect taxes from. So the question is a short-term rental considered a hotel under the definition as it was approved by the citizens? And the answer to that is, I'm not sure. It's vague. We use some older language in this ordinance, so we have 2 different sentences. The first one is a more restrictive sentence that basically says a hotel basically has to have 5 or more rooms to be used for the accommodation. And so that's why we've only been collecting the hotel motel tax on the level 3, because those are the only ones that would exceed the 5 for the definition. But we do have a more expansive definition that it continues on. It basically includes any and all other facilities where rooms or sleeping facilities or space are furnished for consideration. And so when you hear that, that's a much more broad, expansive reading that arguably could cover all short-term rentals, because all of them are accomplishing that. But when you look at statutory construction and interpretation, it really would be up to a court. The risk would be a court challenge, and what they would look at is the first sentence operative on the second sentence, or are they both stand alone? Meaning, does the definition of hotel include both everything that has 5 rooms and all these other catch-alls, or is the second sentence informed by the first one? So really our options would be, the safest option would be, if we're considering increasing the hotel motel tax, or if we want to have this clarified by the people, we would just include the definition of short-term rentals explicitly in the definition, because when this was originally passed, that wasn't a thing. And so that's why there's a little tension and vagueness there. If we wanted to take the risk, we certainly could go forward with attempting to collect those taxes. I think that we'd probably catch a legal challenge, and again, I don't know how a court would interpret that. So that's kind of where we are on the hotel motel tax, and I think it would require a little bit more investigation on our part to make a recommendation to this body.
So you're saying if we go back to the people like to raise the hotel motel tax, at the same time, we can change the definition of the Airbnb so we can get taxes from them?
Yes, ma'am.
And so that would change from them paying them to the Airbnb system? Because I think they currently pay taxes directly to like the Airbnb people or VRBO people, correct? And we're supposed to remit those back, or they're supposed to remit them to us?
Right, so my understanding is they're definitely paying the sales tax, but only category 3 is being collected for the hotel motel tax. And so if there was a change, as Councilor Ford had asked about, then that would clarify it so that both STR 1s and 2s would be explicitly defined as being a hotel, and the tax could be collected from them, and then we would obtain that.
And I would like to see them have to pay the hotel motel tax. Being on the tourism committee, that's very important, that money.
Next slide, please. So we've talked a little bit about the tools that we have with our code enforcement. It's basically our code enforcement citations is how we're enforcing our licensing. The courtesy notices that Rocky mentioned that are being sent out regularly are not being responded to. We have had a third-party monitoring service of host compliance since 2022. One of the options that we could look at would be if we did update our short-term rental ordinance, it would be coordinating with some of these third-party hosting sites. Let them know that there's permitting requirements, that you're hosting folks on here that don't have permits, and we'd like to see you take it down. So that would be an alternative means that wouldn't be enforcement against the owners, but it would limit the market that they would have. And that may help get compliance, because if they're not able to market on the large sites, that might be enough of an incentive for them to go ahead and get licensed.
But would the large sites do that? Because they would be losing money.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we've been trying to come up with, alternative solutions.
Yeah.
And so that would be yet to be seen, because we haven't had those conversations with them. Next slide, please. So the whole reason that we're even looking at updating or changing our ordinance is because of the increase in the number of police calls for service over the last 2 years. Specifically, we've had at permitted STRs 28 calls for services. At unpermitted STRs, we've had 30 calls for service, and the top address is on there, 1205 West Quincy Street. And then the frequent types of issues that we're having, and this is why we've addressed them in the updated ordinance, are the parking issues and the noise disturbance issues. And I wanted to invite Chief Arnold to talk a little bit about what our experience has been in the field and what we've been seeing, problem-wise from our officers, and why we need to, tighten up our ordinance to give our officers, additional tools to address those problems.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, Mr. Spurgeon. Lance Arnold, Chief of Police. As you know, the slide really does kind of say it all, but the challenges that we've had, we mentioned at the last meeting when this first came up, and Trevor did a fantastic job really of describing how this is really what got all of this started, where we were going to calls primarily where an adult was renting through one of the platforms, was renting an Airbnb or a short-term rental, and what it was really intended for was a giant party for typically juveniles. In several of those instances last summer, we actually did have shots fired, firearm shots fired. We would get there, find shell casings all over the place. People would have scattered everywhere. And these, again, are in regular neighborhoods. They're in the neighborhoods that we all live in. And so that's really what originally caught our attention. The more I've had the discussion with our officers, these are the best that we could find based on what we know are permanent addresses, which we got that information from community development, and then from our partnership with Host Compliance. Joe got the information on the ones that have been turned in to us from Host Compliance that are being advertised that aren't. So we cross-checked all of those addresses to figure out which ones which call for service we've had for each one of those. Those were just active, so we don't know, over again, that's a 2-year period, could there have been more? The other concern that I brought up last time is that we move forward with the opening of the amphitheater. We continue to drive more tourism-type activities towards Broken Arrow, that these are only going to increase. So what typically we had done in the past is once we determined it was a short-term rental, we would turn that information in and code our community development. But as you've heard, community development lacks really any kind of teeth in their enforcement, not only for the unpermitted, but even on the permitted, there wasn't really a mechanism in place to be able to review their license or their permit, to revoke those permits or anything like that. And so that's really kind of what got this started.
So on like the 8 calls on that one address, which is wild that they continue to get calls, or parents calling, or like, does the parents get in trouble for renting out a home?
They can.
Denials?
There's certainly laws associated with host ordinances or laws in place for those kinds of things. However, the parents aren't normally there.
Right.
And without access to the hosting platform or to the owner, we have no idea who actually rented the place.
Okay.
So that's a challenge for us as well.
Okay.
When you have an outside owner, I mean, you can eventually maybe get that information from the large platforms, but at that time of night,
Yeah.
not so much. So,
Yeah.
and we did mention either one of the other services that host compliance, which is done through Granicus, does for the city is they actually do operate a 24/7 hotline. And so if you have neighbors, and they're maybe not rise to the level of a police-related call, but if you have neighbors, and we were unaware even at the police department until we started having this conversation with Rocky's team and Joe, that 24/7 line was even available to us. But again, those are really for the permitted ones
Right.
who have turned in their application and have all of that information available to be able to provide to us. So on the unpermitted ones, we have no idea at that moment at 2:00 in the morning who the owner really would be.
Yeah.
So the address that had the 8, were they permitted or not permitted?
Not permitted.
So like we have nothing to hold over them. We can't say we're gonna take your permit away because they're like, we don't have a permit.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Next slide, please. So, what was some of the feedback that we received from the folks that operate in the space and who work in this on the day-to-day basis? So several of the requests for changes, as I had mentioned, were relief or adjustments for type 1 ownerships. And we're in agreement with a lot of these changes because, like we talked about, the intensity of the use can designate what type of regulation that we need to have. So, for example, one of the questions that we had was about the license visibility and the numbers on the listing, especially for type 1s where the owner is living on site. There was a concern over listing the actual address before it's being booked, and if they had to publish their permit and licensing, then that information would be out there. So one of the things that we looked at was exempting type 1 short-term rentals on the mandate for the specific license number to be displayed on the listing itself. And then this would avoid disclosing the specific address of the short-term rental. But what we would recommend is to retain the requirement that the license is needed to list on the platform. And that goes back to one of the enforcement mechanisms that we think that would help. If we have that requirement that they have to submit it to the platform, but it's not visible, that removes the concern over people knowing where the owner, lives, but it still makes sure that the hosting company knows that you have to have a license to have it on there, and if they don't, they shouldn't list it. So I think that would address some of the short-term type 1 owners' concerns. The second issue we had was the clarification on the platform tax remittance. So basically what we would do for this is we would just add clarifying language that the hosting platform itself may remit applicable taxes and fees on the licensee's behalf, and that's exactly what you're talking about, Mayor. And so it would just be a matter of designating and making it acceptable for the hosting platform to remit those fees and taxes, and that would remove a burden from the STR owner. The third was preference for transition at renewal rather than a fixed deadline. So the idea is when the permit would come up for renewal, you would have an effective date of transition so that the existing permitted STR of the licensees have until their next renewal period to come into full compliance instead of a fixed 90-day period. So it would just give them a long, a longer on-ramp,
There you go.
a longer on-ramp to become in compliance with all the additional changes. And like I said, I think that those are acceptable, reasonable, asks that we would recommend. If there's not any questions, we could go to the next slide, please. The decision points are basically we can adopt, modify, or reject any of the changes that we have per section. We talked about the license visibility and privacy. Let's talk about the insurance approach. So one of the things that we had in there was to require short-term rentals to have a $1 million commercial general liability insurance requirement. So one of the options that we could have for the short-term rentals types 1 would be we could exempt the short-term rentals type 1 from that requirement, or alternatively, if this body would like to, we could remove the insurance mandate citywide if the council preferred that. Go to the next slide, please. We can look at some of the information we found about insurance. So one of the questions this body had at the last meeting was, let's look at it like practically. How much would it cost a business owner to obtain this type of insurance coverage? And the information that we found was a standalone policy for $1 million would be approximately $2,000 to $3,000 annually. My understanding was that the host coverage, the hosting sites like Airbnb and VRBO already provide $1 million of secondary coverage at no cost. So if they're listing and getting booked through those sites, that would already be in place and that would satisfy the requirement. I think the difficulty is there's a lot of other sites that, I don't know if Rocky has information on those, if any of the other sites have that as a benefit.
No, I'm not aware.
Okay. And then the other option would be, if we did have the requirement, for an umbrella policy offering $1 million of coverage is approximately $200 to $400 annually. And so, again, this would be a decision point for council on this, recommended requirement for the $1 million of policy is you could require it for all short-term rentals, you could require it for none of them, or you could exempt short-term rentals 1 and have it required for 2 and 3. It's really up to you on what you want to do.
Well, when this was brought to us at the last meeting, I didn't even know there were 3 different categories. I just thought it was just a blanket. Did you all know there was 3 different categories?
I think I had it, an inkling, but maybe didn't understand.
So, I mean, that kind of makes more sense on like the, like the smaller one to maybe not have to carry the bigger one. But then that umbrella policy for $200 to $400 is really, I mean, in the big scheme of things, that's not that much when you're doing business. I mean, really, that'll protect them as well. The $2,000 to $3,000 would be kind of a lot for someone with a smaller Airbnb to have to take in.
Mr. Pickle.
I was gonna say so pardon me. I know I had reached out to quite a few different colleagues that I have in the industry, and I know we had the one owner that was saying that her personal insurance policy covered her Airbnbs, and I'm not saying that it doesn't, but nobody had ever heard of that, where a personal policy would provide something that's being done commercially. And so when you look at the umbrella policy offering $1 million, that would kind of $200 to $400. That would kind of be the same. Is that a personal umbrella or is that a commercial umbrella? Because those are 2 different types of things as well. But then again, is that something we want to get into the weeds with? Is requiring, forcing liability coverage? I mean, because what is the impact on the city if that's not in place? There really isn't, because it goes back to the homeowner, business owner, or whatever it would be. But like I said, I've never heard of a personal homeowner's policy providing coverage for commercial use on other structures on their property. So I was a bit surprised by that one. I couldn't have anybody really validate that either. But like I said, going back, you're getting in the weeds. You're really getting in the weeds of policy language and all of that kind of stuff to know if it's providing the right coverage that we've meant it to. you know, if that makes sense.
Well, maybe if there's a way we can strengthen like our requirements on the front end, like this part wouldn't really be that important
Yeah,
at the end of
yeah.
the day, you know?
We do have one person signed up to speak. They didn't mark, I'm assuming they want to speak.
Yes.
Okay. Carla Coates?
Thank you. I'm Carla Coates, and I am a short-term rental owner of 2 properties in Broken Arrow. I am permitted, legal, and I am absolutely in full support of a permit being required, because I want you all to see how beautiful it can be for our economy and our neighborhoods. I mean, I keep my properties looking good. And as far as the police calls, I think it's important that we all be permitted, and that you all do what you need to do to enforce it if it's not permitted. But for us out here who are law-abiding and rule-abiding residents of Broken Arrow, we're just trying to do the right thing collectively. And so to hear more cost coming our way, I know that Airbnb and Vrbo, they do provide the insurance. They do vet the guests before we ever even know that they've booked with us. And there are some bad apples, and we don't want them any more than the city of Broken Arrow wants them. I don't want them in my property. So I came in here loaded for bear, but I think that you all are doing a good job in deciding what needs to be done and however we can support that.
Do you mind me asking, the 2 that you have, would they be considered a 1 or a 2 or a?
Type 2.
Type 2, type 2. And then, what would you say is the percentage of the time that your people that are renting those are going through the Airbnb or VRBO sites versus a different way?
I only have 2.
Uh-huh.
Airbnb is about 70% and Vrbo is about 30%.
Well, there you go. And they provide that secondary coverage for you?
Yes, sir. Yes.
On this, like this situation is typical of most things, right? The bad eggs make
We
you
all
do
want
so
them
much
out.
more, and it's like we just want them to not do bad things, but it's like, and we have to make things more stringent, you know, and which obviously the ultimate goal is to be safe and you guys be able to run your business, and the thought of incurring more costs for the people who are doing it correctly just to try to get the ones that are, we can't even get to sign up for a permit. I don't really like that. So, but there's gotta be a way to figure out, you know, how to get the ones that are unpermitted, not doing what they're supposed to do.
And the hotel tax, we are already taxed up to our noses. I mean, really. And that tax comes right back to you, the state of Oklahoma and the city of Broken Arrow. And so I don't know how you can think that we are a hotel, or
Well, I think the point was, instead of staying in a hotel where we would get the tourism tax dollars or sales, or the tax dollars, they're staying in a VRBO or Airbnb instead of staying in our hotels. So I think that's where, is that what you're meaning?
Yeah. And so what taxes are you paying now besides the?
state and local taxes.
Do
Okay.
you know
And-
about what the percentage that is?
I'm sorry I didn't bring
It's
it,
okay.
but I know that it's substantial.
Yeah. I just know, and since, and I'm probably pretty confident there's quite a few people on the council and things like that have rented Airbnbs for the RPOs. And there is such a strong benefit to having those when you're wanting to, well, like I'll just use, my daughter's wedding. We rented an Airbnb and we had additional family that came, and it was much nicer to have everyone at the same place versus we're getting 4 or 5 hotel rooms and having to go to a common area. So there's a lot of benefits to it for sure, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. But then I do go back and just want to echo kind of what the mayor said, is there's got to be a way that for people like yourself that are doing it, and we'll just say correctly, you know, not impacting what you're doing, but trying to figure out a way, how can we get those bad apples? You know?
Yeah, and
those-
the hotels, they don't vet anyone. If you've got a credit card, whether it's a legal credit card or a stolen credit card and ID, here's your room. And we as short-term rental owners don't get any sort of hotel incentives like the hotels do here. So I know I take great pride in hosting. I like things to be a spirit of excellence, and that's how I'll keep it regardless of what you all decide. But I hope that you'll take what we have to say into consideration.
Our hotel tax that we get from the hotels goes directly into marketing our city, which brings people into our city who's staying at your bed and baths and Airbnb and the hotels. So you are benefiting indirectly without paying for the taxes is why, is what.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Which I feel like it's everyone's concern, when neighbors come and say, we don't want this Airbnb in our neighborhood, and we say, we're gonna make sure they follow the rules, and we're gonna make sure, you know, that, that they're not gonna be a nuisance. I think that's the end, that's where we're trying to get. We want you to be able to make money, of course. We want people to come to our city and stay in your Airbnbs, but we also want you to be a good neighbor. And I'm not saying you specifically, I'm just like in general.
Yeah.
And that's where we're trying to get. We don't want to put so many rules on you where it is a strain for you to do business. But then at the end of the day, you're in a neighborhood, you know, where people, that's their whole life investment, and that's where seniors thought they would go to a quiet place to live, and then a fight breaks out and fires, you know, shots are fired or whatever, and not that that's a typical night at an Airbnb in Broken Arrow, but clearly it has happened. So, I mean, we want to try to get to a happy medium. Is there anything that you can add to our discussion that we haven't brought up that you could think of, or?
Yes, both of my properties, I've owned one for 20 years, so I was the resident living there. And the other one right here in the Rose District, I've owned for 6 years, and I lived there for 4. On our short-term rental, we put quiet hours. Mine are through the week, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and on the weekends, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. are quiet hours. So my neighbors all have my phone number, and I have been called a few times. And I have the ability to ask them to exit the premises if they don't adhere to the rules.
Yeah.
So I think to have rules in place, and then, you know, of course, the police involvement, should we need it? I mean, as citizens, the police are here for us. So I thank you for coming. If somebody is raising a ruckus at my property, I want you there as fast as you can get there. And I appreciate it.
So one of the things we're recommending is a noise monitor. And I know you said the neighbors will call you if it gets, you know, rowdy or whatever. But do you have any type of thing like that now, a noise monitor on the premises?
I have Ring cameras on both of my properties on the front porch, and it notifies me if somebody is at the door, but not noise per se. But I'm not opposed to getting that.
Yeah, it seemed it was really reasonable, I think, like $100 or something, you could purchase it, so.
Yeah. Thank you
My
so
only
much.
comment would be that, you know, I know it's been used a lot, and here some of our counselors use them that way. My wife and I had 4 apartments that we had for 25 years, and a commercial building. Of course, we kept insurance on it. and we never have any trouble with renting it. So it worked out so well that we never thought about changing it. My main thing with the Airbnb, no matter what we do, is to make sure that police have as much information as they can, you know what I mean, as that can be given to them to accommodate them in case there was a problem. We had one across the street from where I live, and they rented it, and it was all kids. And they were up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and ended up costing them, their parents, $800. I talked to the owner because that's how much damage that they had done. So I never had damage like that in my rental property. Not to say it couldn't have. It's just that I always had rather have that than a temporary rental and not really know the people. If you work through companies that can pretty well guarantee that they're, you know what I mean, solid people, I think that's great because there's a need to go in just for a week or 3 or 4 days or something like that. So I'm certainly in favor of it. I just want to make sure the police have anything that they can to help accommodate it as far as getting information.
Well, I can't speak for anyone who doesn't follow the rules. So,
All right.
I mean, my Rose District property's right on the southeast corner of First and Freeport. And every third house now in this area right here, they're just tearing stuff down and rebuilding. And I'm thinking Airbnb, short-term rental, and it's all over. So
Right,
I'm all for you enforcing codes.
right, right. So whatever they need, I need, the police.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
So that is encouraging to hear the businesses that are responsible. So for example, the quiet hours that she has from 10 to 7, one of the requirements that we would have would apply that to the less responsible folks who aren't doing that. And we just codified that into our ordinance that would say quiet hours apply to the city from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. The same with the interior non-recording noise monitoring devices. Chief Arnold mentioned that was one of the main reasons for the calls. So if you have a local responsible agent that has to respond within an hour, and they have the technology in there that is very affordable. I think, like you said, it's $100 or so.
That's what Chief Arnold checked the prices at our last meeting, so yeah, it was very inexpensive.
That can notify them that, hey, the people that are there are causing a ruckus, and it's after the quiet hours, and so they can address it, and if they don't, then, you know, our police officers would have that information to go and do that. So I think it's a way to just make sure that the bad actors, you know, we can bring them up to the standard that we need them in our community.
And
I
think-
was gonna ask her too, I'm sorry, I should have asked you when you were down here. So there was a certain percentage that you said you got from the Airbnbs and stuff, like how else do they find out about your place if it's not from one of those sites?
Probably referrals or
Oh,
just,
just referral, oh, okay.
On mine, only through Airbnb and Vrbo. I don't rent anything outside that platform.
Okay.
Okay. Next slide, please. We've already gone through several of these recommended changes. You know, we talked about adding the definitions for the type 1, 2s, and 3s. One of the things we had in the original ordinance was a potential discount for permitting fees if there's additional training that we needed. After talking to Rocky, we decided to remove that. We would need a decision from the body on what they want to do with insurance, whether they want to eliminate that as a requirement or if they just want to have it for certain types of short-term rentals. On the noise monitor that we're talking about, that would be one of the other exceptions that we would recommend. The type 1s, those are owner occupied, so somebody would actually be living there on premise. So if we didn't want to burden the smaller short-term rentals, we could exempt them, with the idea being the owner would be on site and could address those issues.
I hear and understand they're owner occupied, but you know what? Owners go out to eat, they go on vacation. They're not there 24/7, I imagine. So, I mean, there are opportunities for the owner to be gone and the renter to make noise or cause disturbance while the owner's gone. I understand the argument that she made, well, I live here, but I live in my house too, but I'm not there all the time. I mean, I travel, I'm getting ready to go to Oklahoma City for several days, I'll be in DC, I take vacations. So, I mean, as far as, I could see doing an exemption if it was something really onerous, but like we said, $100 doesn't seem like that big a deal on that particular one.
And that's certainly something we can leave in place. Again, it just would be the direction of this body on that. And like I said, we discussed the rest of those on there. So next slide, please. Next slide. That's just, the annual licenses and fees would be set by the manual fees. So the council would set those fees. We could do it by resolution or on the manual fees. Next slide, please. We've already talked about the local responsible agent. They would have to, respond within an hour. That way we know that we're going to have somebody local that we can deal with if there's a problem. There also is, in terms of operation standards, a parking plan. The idea is if you have, 20 vehicles showing up to one house that's only designed to hold, 4 folks, they are by definition going to be blocking driveways, parking in front of fire hydrants, maybe parking, on the curbs. We just need to have them to have some plan that addresses, how are you going to comply with our parking requirements? And the same holds true for the safety map and the emergency information. That's all listed out in a very long appendix. It's the things that you would think of, like, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, exit plans, things of that nature, contact information for the local responsible agent. Next slide, please.
I wonder if the Airbnbs, like and Airbos, like if they require any of that kind of stuff. Because I know the ones I stay at, it seems like they have like a safety plan and different things like that. I don't know, just curious.
She said yes.
Shaking her head, yes.
Oh, yes.
Again, talking about the different operating standards, having the local responsible agent, the sound limits, we talked about the quiet hours, the exterior cameras, that would be just as simple as having a ring camera, just so that they know who's coming and who's going. We talked about the parking restriction. There are occupancy limits. So, for example, we have a requirement under the operations that at any time the number of persons on site who are not overnight occupants may not exceed 10, and that would prohibit a gathering of more than that. So the idea is you don't want a huge block party where you have 8 people staying at a short-term rental, and then you have another 15 people show up, and it spills out into the street, into the curtilage. And then on the parking, the requirement is that there be at least one off-street parking space per sleeping area, plus one additional space for the owner host, unless it's otherwise provided for the mixed use and commercial districts. And then it explicitly states that vehicles should not obstruct sidewalks, driveways, or park on unpaved yards contrary to code. Those are currently codified requirements, but it just puts it in a simple way, so the short-term rental people know, like, hey, these are our requirements for parking, and you need to abide by them. Next slide, please. So we talked about the hosting platform responsibilities, about changing it so that they could collect and remit the taxes. And then the ownership cap for short-term rentals. We would need direction on this. The policy thought on this was whether or not we wanted to have, I don't want to use it'd be like a short-term rental magnet, somebody like a Blackstone or, a LLC that wants to, own, 50 houses and turn them all into short-term rentals. The idea being, we can come up with whatever number you wanted. I think 4 was an arbitrary number in terms of it being smaller. So the idea would be we would have some limit on the total number of short-term rentals any individual entity could own to prohibit and prevent something like a large corporation, like I said, like a private equity firm.
Why would we want to limit someone's ability to have their own business grow? Like if they have the ability to have 5, 10 VRBOs in our city and it meets our ordinance, why would we want to limit them?
You might not want to. What we've seen in other communities is they can, if you get these large groups that start getting a large number of them, they can start pricing out single-family homes.
Sure.
They can take over whole areas. They can start competing with first-time home buyers.
I see that. Mm-hmm.
But again, that's not something that we have to do.
And they can price out the smaller mom and pops that only own
Yeah,
one or
because they have,
two.
yeah.
And then you're gonna draw more of your foreign-owned entities and those kind of things.
So those were some of the additional, suggestions for your consideration. Next slide, please. Suspension and revocation standards. So we do have a escalating suspension and revocation ladder. Basically, the way it works is the city would suspend a license for 30 days if you have 2 verified complaints within a 12-month period, and 90 days if there's been 3 verified complaints within a 12-month period. And it's not just any type of complaint. The type of nuisance behavior that we're talking about is defined in the ordinance. And so I can give you an example of what those types of things are. It'd be like public intoxications, unlawful possession or consumption of alcohol by minors, consuming marijuana or products in a public space, contributing to delinquency of a minor, fighting in public, parking violations. It's not just littering. So these are fairly significant public safety concerns. And so there's a ladder that would allow for suspension. Then there would be automatic suspensions if you have, like I said, 2 verified complaints with a 12-month period. In addition, we can also have immediate suspensions if there's a serious incident or failure for a local responsible agent to respond as required by the ordinance. That way we just have some enforcement mechanism for those that we've gotten into the system.
And what if we suspend their license for 30 days, but they continue to rent? Then what do we do?
We would cite them every day for operating without a permit, and we would have a fine for each of those days. And we would try to collect as much of that as we can if we can get them to court.
Would that be something like we would put a lien on their house if they didn't pay those fines?
I don't know if that's something that we actually do on the code enforcement side. Joe and Rocky are both shaking their heads. I don't believe that's something.
So we can fine them, but they don't have to pay for it? Is that what you're,
Hope none of them are watching this meeting right
Well,
now.
I'm just saying, we need some teeth, and it doesn't sound like
Yeah.
it's got any teeth to it to me.
Well, my question would be, can we?
I know, I'll pay my HOA dues, they put a lien on my house.
Yeah. Can we do that?
I don't know the answer to that. I can find out. and
I'm
research
just
that.
saying, this whole meeting, I feel like is to put some teeth in that. That doesn't feel like any teeth. Is my opinion.
Like I said, one of the difficulty is with the foreign owners, they get a summons to come to municipal
Yeah.
court in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. They just ignore it. And so we were looking for alternative means of enforcement, such as working with the hosting companies, to have them delisted if they're not getting licensed and not compliant. And so
There's, and I can't remember if it was an OML conference or if it was an LC conference, there was a vendor that actually has a software that can identify the unpermitted, they know, they can identify the homes that are on those platforms that are within your city, and they have a mechanism to contact those people and get them to be permitted in your city. I'll find out if it was OML or NLC, but I'll find out who the vendor was. I feel like I got their card. But it was pretty cool, the system. No, wait, I don't know how much the software was, but if it can get us all, permitted, it might
Yeah.
help with that situation, but,
that would be very helpful.
yeah.
Next slide, please.
How many slides do we have, Trevor?
This is the last one.
Okay.
I wanted to thank Chief Arnold. He did create the slides.
Thank you, Chief Arnold.
So really where we are, this was just for a discussion. If there's any specific directions that you'd like to give us at this time, we could take those and then we could rewrite the ordinance and either bring it back for another preview or for a final adoption. It's really at this body's discretion. And so I think at this point, staff is just looking for directions on some of those key, decision points, such as insurance. Are you good with the safety plan? Are you good with the local responsible agent? Those type of issues.
I think since the permitted ones, are more than likely, probably almost 100% of them are on Airbnb and VRBO, and they already provide the insurance. I see that as not necessary for us, almost like what Counselor Pickle said, like that's kind of getting, really drawing down in the weeds and really, and I don't know how that provides any more safety per se, or, I mean, that's more on them if something goes on than it is for us, but, so I'm okay with removing that, but everything else, yeah.
We certainly will make that, we can make that change.
But I'm just one vote, so.
I'm in agreement with that, also.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to, we need to explore our further options of, how we can, enforcement options, whether that is a lien or if there's some way we can, I don't know, if it, legally, if we can, there's a lockout, tag out kind of thing, that we could do. I mean, there has to be something that makes these folks want to get into compliance. And there has to be a way that we can say, okay, enough's enough, I'm not sure what that is, but that's why we have brilliant minds
Yes.
like you folks that we employ to dig into these things.
Brilliant.
One thing that we can do is we can look at what some of the other jurisdictions are doing in terms of their, if they've got any better ideas, we'll definitely steal those.
I mean, it's gonna be hard to rent if you can't have electric and water at your place.
Right.
Well, I mean,
I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, use the tools you have.
well, there's got to be some accountability is what
Yeah.
I hear the council members saying, and we need to look at all options, and we're not reinventing the wheel. There's opportunities. I mean, we do place liens whenever there's, we have to go in and cut their property or tear down a building. We place liens on those properties. I don't know if that's legal, but there needs to be some way to say this, that, if you're not in compliance, then there's got to be some negative inducement to get it in compliance.
Right.
We do appreciate those that are in compliance and follow the rules.
Yes, thank
For
you.
sure, yes.
So if it's council's pleasure, we'll take the comments that we'd received tonight. We'll go back and we'll rewrite the ordinance. It sounds like there's still enough discussion points that it would be beneficial to have it on for preview again.
Yeah, I feel like it's on the front end that we need to do, like with the actual, like Rockies area, if we can get that maybe nailed down a little tighter and stricter, then maybe then the police department won't have to respond as much if we can get it hammered down a little tighter on the front end.
I mean, we have quiet hours for our parks and for our businesses.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make sense that we do for these as well.
All right.
Thank you, everybody who worked on it, and our
So
citizens.
no action needs to
Sitting
be
on the
taken.
committees.
No,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Nope, okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
So moved.
Roll call.
Your motion and second aren't showing up.
I
Oh,
forgot we logged in.
click it.
I'm getting there.
Oh, did we log in?
Yeah. Well, some of us did.
Well, I
Okay.
tried to log in.
Motion by Counselor Green, second by Counselor Pickle.
All right.
We're adjourned.
We're adjourned.